Welcome, everybody, to the Operations and Safety Committee meeting. Would we all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Welcome. I will now call this public hearing to order. I hereby open the public hearing this afternoon in the fiscal 2021 Florida Department of Transportation funding under the Federal Transit Administration Section 5310 Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities Program. In order to apply for funding under this program, HART is required to conduct a public hearing to gather public input. This public hearing was duly advertised on November 25, 2019 in the Tampa Bay Times legal section. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. HART staff will make a brief presentation about the application process and project requests. I will then open the floor for citizen comments regarding the projects presented. Anyone who wishes to speak must sign in at the back of the room and identify themselves. In order to hear from everyone who wishes to speak, speaker comments are limited to 3 minutes. After citizen comments, the public hearing will be closed. Staff will now make the brief presentation. Mr. Becker.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, board members. This is the public hearing notice that was posted in the Tampa Bay Times on, as you said, November the 25th, and duly processed through some other local newspapers as well, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. The purpose of this hearing is to request the capital funds to purchase 5 vehicles that will help support the HART Plus service and provide reliable fleet for us. And in order to receive those funds, FTA and FDOT requires applicants to provide an opportunity to hold a public hearing in order to give those individuals and/or groups an opportunity to present their views and comments regarding HART's proposed grant application. As I said earlier, this is a listing of the outreach efforts that we did posting our public notice. The FTA 5310 program purpose: the program is intended to improve the mobility of our seniors and individuals with disabilities by removing barriers to the transportation service and expanding our transportation mobility options. This is the flow of the money that comes from the Federal Transit Administration, and it's sent to our designated recipient, which is the Florida Department of Transportation, and then it is distributed to the subrecipients, HART, public agencies, community transportation coordinators, the CTC, and private and nonprofit organizations. The FTA funding for the 5310 is a competitive application process administered through FDOT. Applications are ranked and prioritized. Capital request for our vans is $400,000, and that will get us about 5 vans. HART would pay 10% of that amount. FDOT pays 10%, and then the FTA would pay the remaining 80% on those vehicles. There's an additional request in this grant application for operating monies for our HART Plus taxi voucher service in the amount of $500,000. HART would pay 50% of that, with FTA and FDOT would pay the remaining 50% as well. The vans, 5 vans that we plan on purchasing run about $80,000 a piece. HART purchased these through the Transit Research Inspection Procurement Services, known as TRIPS, which is administered through the USF Center for Urban Transportation, commonly known as Cutter. The HART Taxi Voucher Service, HART implemented this program back in January of 2016. The same-day service is provided to our patrons who qualify through our HART Plus service under this program. In FY19, we performed 82,381 trips provided under this program. The program cost HART approximately $1.3 million a year. Currently, our provider is Yellow Cab of Tampa. And with that, we're open for comments from the public if there are any.
Thank you. We will now take public comment regarding the fiscal year 2021 FTA Section 5310 Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities Program grant application. For those who wish to speak, I again ask that you please limit your comment to 3 minutes. Does anyone in the audience wish to comment? Pardon? Is your microphone? Do it again? Okay. Does anybody in the public wish to speak? Appearing to be none, this concludes the public hearing. Okay, moving on with the rest of our agenda.
Can I just ask a question? I don't know, Julie, if you could answer this today, but normally when a law requires a public hearing, it's in front of the governing body, and this is just a committee. Is this appropriate to go in front of the committee?
Hi, good afternoon. Cindy Stiglitz, interim CFO for HART. Yes, this is just a requirement of the FDOT application process that we hold a public hearing. It doesn't require that it even get approved. The public hearing is approved. When I brought the grant application to the F&A committee in November, and subsequently you approved it at the December board meeting to resolve to apply and then execute any grant that comes from it, that has to be in front of the governing body.
Okay. All right, well, thank you.
Are you there? I do have an additional question.
Yes.
I know we had approved this at the last meeting. Now, how will this be delineated in the 2021 budget?
So the grant that we'll be applying for, we would budget that in our FY21 budget in anticipation of getting the grant.
Okay.
I was going to share some good news today. I've shared some good news with Carolyn this morning. We actually, I think I even mentioned in the committee that we were anticipating the FY20 award. We got that yesterday.
Good.
So we've budgeted for that item, and we'll just go ahead and apply that to our FY20 capital and operating budgets for expenses.
Miss.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Mechanic, for bringing up that point. I had the same question, because also, even if it's acceptable and legal to have a public hearing here, we don't have as much public participation at these committee meetings, and just to make sure we're maintaining the appearance of a full transparency of things that are going on, I would think in the future might be a good idea to consider having public hearings at the meeting where we have the most public participation. It also raises questions that I have discussed with staff as this committee has kind of morphed its scope. My understanding when we started this was a safety committee that was appointed in the wake of the tragedy of Thomas Dunn, and we were, it was kind of ad hoc to address the safety measures, and then it's sort of morphed into more of these considerations that I had thought might go in front of the finance committee, purchasing and such. And I just wonder if, so I've been thinking that we, haven't, the process by which this committee was established and then tasked hasn't really gone before our full board, to my mind, but maybe the time to, assess all of that is when we get to the point we'll get to very quickly in new assignments of committee members, and we can have that discussion at our governing, at the full board about exactly what the scope of this is and compared to the finance committee, and then who wants to be on it each one next year, and have that all fleshed out fully in public at our board level.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that this will be something that comes up for the board discussion in our January meeting when we do the shuffling of the boards. I do believe. I echoed your commentary on the Finance and Audit Committee. It just seemed like the Finance Committee was getting lost in the weeds on some issues that, irrespective of what they said, it was still coming to the full board for vote. And I felt that, I don't know how much the Finance and Audit Committee is going to be able to contribute on a regular basis. That should be involved heavily in the budgeting process, should be involved heavily in the CAFR process, reviewing what's going on there. To that end, I do appreciate and understand the Operations Committee, as it appears to have morphed since its inception, becoming more of a venue for that type of discussion on these issues. So I do agree with you in that perspective. So hopefully we'll clarify that through the course of the next session in January.
I just wanted to add one more thing regarding this public hearing. And as you mentioned, with the Finance and Audit Committee, we typically take grant applications and those matters to that committee and subsequently to the board. So that's what we did. But with the public hearing, that has typically been done at the ADA committee. And so this same presentation was given at the ADA committee in November, just a month ago. We were not able to offer it as a public hearing because of the advertisement requirements. We also wanted board approval before we held the public hearing. So we got board approval on December 2nd, and that's why we had a separate public hearing. But the committee that actually saw this presentation, where it would be more germane to what they do, was the ADA committee in November.
Thanks.
Anybody else have any other comments? Okay, good deal. All right, we have the minutes from the November 18th Operations and Safety Committee meeting. I'm sure if anybody has read them, entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Like sign opposed. Thank you. Public comments. Anybody any public comment wishing to address? Okay. Presentations. First presentation is a Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. Colin Malloy.
Again, my name is Colin Malloy. I'm the Director of Safety and Security for the Hillsborough Area Regional Transit Authority. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of this committee again. Today, I will be presenting on Public Transit Agency Safety Plan. It's also known by the acronym of PTAS. The way I will be kind of detailing the PTAS, or Public Transit Agency Safety Plan, is providing an overview of the regulation upon which it was formed, as well as some of the FTA safety program applicability that goes into the Public Transit Agency Safety Plan, internal requirements that the agency will have to follow, including safety performance targets, and then closing, talking about the approval process, as well as the timeline HART has and how it relates to this committee and to this board. So again, the Public Transit Agency Safety Plan was mandated by FTA through 49 CFR Part 673. So what that really represents is this is a federal action that all agencies have to put into place. As you recall, at the last committee meeting, we talked about safety management systems and SMS. I think a good way to think of this is SMS, or that safety management system, is really the framework or the philosophy that the federal government is asking transit agencies to incorporate into their safety plans. The Public Transit Agency, PTAF, is actually the deliverable. That is the document that the agency is creating that details all the different processes, all the different requirements that they're going to be putting in there. And again, just as a refresher on that, is that they really are asking agencies within this plan to make sure that it's risk-based, so that you're identifying what your unique hazards are within your agency. And one of the reasons they did this is that some of the hazards or mitigations that are explicit to Tampa may not be as relevant as they are in Atlanta or even St. Petersburg and Pinellas. So they really try to make it a customizable plan and scalable. A key thing is that they did put a hard deadline on this deliverable going to the FTA and to our state safety oversight for July 20 of 2020. And later in this presentation, I'll give you a more detailed timeline after we talk about some of the components. Now, FTA, this document is the end product that FTA's last couple years of federal requirements for transit agencies pulls them all together. So some of those requirements that FTA had made applicable is that they need to make sure that the new state safety oversight guidelines are put in place. The National Public Transit Safety Plan are put in place. So what that really means at kind of a frontline perspective is that the FTA is ensuring through this plan that transit agencies have staff that have knowledge in safety, have taken the training for it, agencies have made it a priority, as well as meeting certain FTA standards that they have to report on. There's additional reporting requirements for safety events. How do we mitigate risks that some of our bus operators have on the security side? So all these different notice for proposed rulemaking and statutes that FTA has put in place over the last couple of years, they're asking us to house within this plan. Now, internally, those requirements are detailed through the PTAS. So the SMS pillars or components that we talked about last month, they're actually going to go in this plan. So taking that philosophical approach of SMS, the policy statement, ensuring that we have the necessary resources for our safety program, the training requirements, how we communicate to our employees, all those details go into this plan and need to be ensured that they are detailed at a very practical level of who's doing what. It also puts in key performance indicators or metrics. So for the first time, FTA is stating that agencies must actually put specific metrics of how their organization is operating from a level of safety. And I talk about that more. Yes, ma'am.
What was SMS?
The safety management system, and that really is the framework. Again, that's the philosophy that they're asking, which is it's more risk-based, it's more performance-based, and scalable.
Thank you.
Yep. Also, it requires that you have an emergency management and preparedness plan. HART has already had that for years based on just our operating environment, as well as being a rail transit agency. And it also puts in timelines and ensures within the document that it's updated on a regular basis, on an annual basis. One of the reasons this came forward is that a number of states, a number of agencies would create a plan or they'd create a process. They never reviewed it. They never communicated to leadership or to the board what they were doing. So this PTAS plan actually documents this requirement at both the federal and state level. The KPIs. I put this in because it's kind of a key item because these are some of the things we will be reporting to you moving forward on. Metrics, safety performance targets of identifying, where we are aspiring to be, where we are, and we will be documenting them in a lot more thorough basis using this criteria that the FTA has set up. This is the first time the FTA has put very specific definitions of how safety events or accidents or incidents, which I talk about in the next slide, how they're defined. And I can give you some examples of specifically what they're looking for. But again, the key things FTA is requiring us to report on is obviously fatalities, injuries, safety events, and our system reliability. So we have to actually establish what we feel our system is going to do in this next year and report to the board and this committee stating, did we meet that goal, did we not? And keeping the board and leadership a little bit better abreast of where the trends and where the risks are moving forward. So an event, what is a safety event? Sometimes that term can be a little bit generic. FTA actually defined it so that it's universal across the industry moving forward. So for a safety event, they use the term either accident, incident, or occurrence. I think the best way to describe this is an accident relates to a serious injury on the rail side, whether we have a derailment or if we had to evacuate a bus for any type of life-critical situation. So an example would be one of our buses that's at a stop, an adverse vehicle rear ends our bus, and individuals are actually transported. That would be a serious injury and would fall in line with an accident. An incident would fall more in line with, say, our bus is at a stop, a passenger is boarding our bus, maybe they slip and fall, they're doing fine, they don't need medical transport. That's more of an incident. Then an occurrence is when there's property damage that may not necessarily result in any type of interruption in revenue service. That would be an occurrence. So these are the criteria and the KPIs that not only we will be reporting to the board on, we'll also be reporting to the FTA moving forward and tracking kind of where we are in terms of those measurements. Again, the plan itself will be signed off by the CEO of our agency, and then we will be going to this committee and to this board seeking approval and communicating exactly what's in that plan to make sure the board is comfortable what our direction is moving forward. Then we will also work hand in hand with FDOT, our state safety oversight, to make sure that the plan meets the criteria they have set forward. So where is HART during this process? What is our timeline? We wanted to provide this slide is that we have already completed a gap analysis. We have completed a transition plan. We are currently developing the PTAS, or Public Transit Agency Safety Plan, as we speak. We'll be looking to come back to give additional updates to this board on our status. And one of the key deliverables is going to be, what is that document, the details within that document, and defining it for this board. And then once it is concluded and signed off by the CEO, we'd be seeking your approval roughly by April of 2020, and that puts us in a very strong position to make sure we meet the compliance deadline that FTA and FDOT have set up for July of 2020. With that, that's the end of my presentation. Some of the key things, I just wanted to make sure that as we talked about SMS, that is the philosophy, the framework. The actual plan and deliverable that's going to be coming in front of this board will be the Public Transit Agency Safety Plan. And then just reaffirming, updating this committee and board on the deadlines and where we are moving forward. Any questions, I'll be happy to address.
I do have one question.
Yes,
The working group that is working on the PSAP,
Details, yes, sir.
who was on that group?
So we're having one of our first meetings later on, but again, we talked about it will be all employees. We want to have frontline employees, members of operations, maintenance,
Okay, good.
training. So
Wanted to make
it's
sure.
all encompassing in terms of not just like 3 or 4 people. We want to make sure we have a wide spectrum representing all facets of our organization.
Okay, I wanted to make sure we had good representation for our union people and our shop people and all up and down the line.
Good question.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank
Completely
you.
agree.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, moving forward, we have the presentation, Voice of the Customer Overview. Mr. Harris.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, board members. I'm Ted Harris. I'm the Chief Customer Experience Officer for HART, new to the organization. I'm here this afternoon to talk to you about the voice of the customer, the overview. HART, in its 2020 success plan, has established 4 areas of outcomes that we're concentrating on: the customer experience, community values, employee success, and financial performance. The voice of the customer is a tactic that we're employing to help us better understand the customer experience. The presentation will form purpose, background, methodology, and timeline. The purpose, most transit agencies have used in the past a simple quantitative measurement of complaints per 100,000 passengers, but HART has expanded that to be a more immersive type of customer satisfaction index. It truly provides input directly from the customer in their own voice, as opposed to waiting for a complaint to come in. The customer satisfaction is nationwide, and it's a top measurement for most transit agencies. The background: this particular program has been around at HART since 2015. The first round was for fixed route operations. In 2018, we expanded that for paratransit. And This year, we're again going to expand that for our streetcar operations, but only after the construction has been completed for the streetcar operations. The methodology for this, these surveys are conducted twice a year in the spring and fall. We do about 500 surveys for fixed route and about 250 surveys on paratransit. The streetcars, because of the growing ridership, we're still probably going to be somewhere between the 250 and the 500. And the big change this year is that we've gone to bilingual survey for English and Spanish passengers. As I said, the timeline, the survey is ongoing right now. We started on December the 3rd. And we are expecting the results to be compiled in February with a report back to the board in March. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Are these written surveys or are these interviews?
I believe they take the form of in paratransit, they're a telephone interview, and on fixed route, they're a personal interview.
Okay, and so I saw you mentioned Spanish speakers. We had this question, I think, the last time we had a presentation. So the interviewers are, or at least some of the interviews are fluent in Spanish?
That's correct.
Okay.
All of them evidently.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, committee action items. Action item A is authorize the interim chief executive officer to award a contract for the rebuild of 4 Tico line streetcars to the Gabaco, I butchered that, corporation, the amount not to exceed $2,744,000. Mr. Allen.
Good afternoon, Brian Allen, Director of Streetcar Operations. This action item is to rebuild 4 of our cars to like-new condition by the original equipment manufacturer, which is Gameco. It involves both interior and exterior refurbishment, and it will happen in, the 4 cars will be sent out in 2-car lots so we can assure that we have cars for service. The funding for this is through FTA State of Good Repair grants and does not require any match from HART. Anyone have any questions?
Question. Is only 4 of the 8 cars, does that mean the other 4 eventually will need to be rebuilt as well, or?
The 5 remaining ones will be tackled by our in-house staff. These are the 4 that need more extensive work.
Okay. So the wear and tear is different between different cars then? I mean,
We have 2 cars that have been out of service for a considerable amount of time. Those would be the first 2 cars to go. And then the next 2 cars that come back, they both need some structural work in the floors, which are a little beyond our capabilities downstairs.
oh, okay, but the work that can be done locally is done, or
Absolutely.
in-house, I should say.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Will this work be done on site or?
No, the cars will be taken back to the manufacturer's plant in Iowa.
And was this a capital item in our budget for this year? Okay. Okay. What is the pleasure?
Move the item.
Okay.
Second?
All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
But question
Very good.
about that, are we, all of, when we pass an item, we're just recommending to the full
For the
board,
board,
is that
passing it
correct?
on to the board, correct.
Because these are worded like we're approving the item, but we're really just,
Well, except for an advance the item to the full HART Board Directors for the January 6th meeting.
oh, got it,
Okay.
okay.
So, again, the confusion with the overlap of the committees. Okay, item B, authorize the interim chief executive officer to approve an agreement between HART and the Hillsborough County Board of County Commissioners to give the local emergency management agency access to the local HART transportation assets and personnel during emergencies. Ivan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ivan Maldonado, Director of Bus Operation. The interlocal agreement that we just referenced basically is to assist the county emergency management, particularly the Emergency Operations Center with transportation for county emergencies as well as disasters requiring evacuations of citizens. We currently provide that same level of services and have participated with the county for many years. This simply would allow us to enter into a local agreement or partnership agreement. The school district just entered into a similar agreement for their transportation department. With this particular agreement, the HART CEO or interim CEO will still continue to have discretion to assist based on HART's capabilities as well as resources. Currently, we operate emergency evacuation routes, 9 of them, covering our entire coverage area. And when we provide those level of services, basically we're taking citizens to shelters. The county provide assistance also with folks going to a special needs transportation, special needs shelters. We will also provide some level of assistance as well with that. HART will submit records of FEMA eligible costs and expenditures, as well as costs associated to transportation requests by the County Emergency Operations Center, and the county will seek FEMA reimbursement on behalf of HART. And that pretty much ends my presentation. I will gladly answer any questions that you may have.
Sorry, I had so many questions
I got
today.
questions also.
Well, how does this work? I mean, this is sort of worded like the Emergency Management Agency has access to our vehicles, but don't we provide the service in coordination with the agency? We don't just turn over our buses to them, right?
That is correct, sir. Yes, we operate our own vehicles. We simply assist, work together with Sunshine Line, work together with the school district that provides most of the transportation in the rural areas where we don't have coverage, or current coverage. But yes, we operate our own buses.
Okay, so this is really a coordination effort where we work with the agency to make sure we're deploying equipment in the proper locations and so forth and so on.
Correct. We currently operate 9 evacuation routes, so we will continue to do so in this agreement.
Okay, great. Thanks, sir.
Do you have a question? Okay, my questions. What triggers this to go into effect?
The Emergency Operations Center would have to be activated. We currently operate this route upon a state-declared emergency. With this particular agreement, they may require some assistance to get folks to, for example, cold shelters, especially in the winter, where we have provided some assistance in the past. With this agreement, we would also assist when needed. But ultimately, the county is the main responsible emergency management agency. We're simply a partner with them.
Okay, just to,
Generally, when the governor declares a state of emergency, then that triggers, and then the county emergency management goes into full operation, and then
Right.
HART gets engaged. And to the extent that our resources are available, for instance, if the conditions are such that HART has made a decision that our operators cannot operate, then we are not obligated to
Okay.
put them at risk.
Okay.
And also, we know that when the wind speeds come to a certain distance,
Right.
30, 35 miles an hour, our buses aren't there. Also, in certain locations, because the school buses are higher and our buses are lower, it may not be feasible, and we make the decision that HART buses can simply not participate.
well, that's, thank you, that's the information, but that's interesting you're talking about cold weather. I don't think I've ever heard of a state of emergency declared for cold weather. What initiates that action, if you will?
That is correct. We do not currently get activated during cold weathers, but there have been instances where the county has requested for us to mobilize, particularly homeless members of the community that need transportation to a particular cold shelter, and they have requested for us to assist with a bus to get them to a certain place that they could stay safe while it's extremely cold outside.
Okay, that's good, okay. What's the pleasure?
Move the item.
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by aye.
Aye.
And this will go to the full board for presentation on January 6th. Let's see, any old business? Any new business? Hope everybody has a wonderful holiday. We stand adjourned. Thank you.